Welcome everybody to today's webinar, Customer Centricity. Is it a panacea or a pipe dream? I'm delighted to welcome you to this very special event. My name is Krishna. I'm your host for today's session, and with me is Elaine Fletcher of IBM. You can follow us on Twitter. You can join and actually chat with us over there, in fact. Now, I will be focused today on our conversation, so I will be going back later to the Twitter hashtag of IBM CMO Study, IBM CMO Study. And you can find me on Twitter at Krishna Day, and you can find Elaine at Elaine4CMO, both of us there on Twitter. In terms of resources for today, we will have a recording of this event, and I'll make sure that people over on Facebook, over at facebook.com/Krishna Day, are aware where that is going to be. And also, you would have probably seen in Twitter previously a link to a page on my website, and I'm sure that the IBM team also will be tweeting out the link for today's session. In terms of the context of today, as you have seen before you joined the event's about customer centricity. Is it a panacea or a pipe dream? Now, Elaine is with us here from IBM Global Business Services, and she joined them over a year ago now as a partner in the Business Analytics and Optimisation Group. She leads strategy development and deployment, and she actually is working across all market sectors. She's been working across many different markets, across products, across multiple channels, delivering sustainable growth with all of her clients. And in fact, she joined IBM from Logica, where she was the UK Director of Business Intelligence for some 11 years, growing the practice from really its foundations when it started up to become one of Gartner's top 10 global organizations. And in fact, in addition to running that practice, she also delivered assignments at C-level, really around customer insights, business intelligence, and performance management strategy, again, across many different sectors. Now, I'm thrilled that we've got Elaine with us here today, because a piece of research that really caught my imagination and my attention was something that I came across last year. It's about 6 months ago now. And you may have seen it. If you haven't, I highly encourage you to actually check it out. The CMO study. And it was a really extensive study. It was fantastic to see this, because there were face-to-face interviews that IBM conducted with over 1,700 chief marketing officers, crossing 19 different industries and 64 countries. And through that research, there was really some interesting insights about what CMOs felt, particularly in terms of the challenges and the opportunities that they're finding at this point in time. It's never been a more exciting time to be involved in the business of marketing, and marketing for your products or your services, whatever business you're in. Yes, there are some challenges, and I'm sure we'll touch on those today, but it actually is a great opportunity for us in terms of leveraging from many different things that were really not at our disposal, let alone 5 years ago, even going back 10, or for some of us, many, many, many more years than that. And we're finding a lot of differences that are happening. So we're going to actually dive into a particular part of this research, but particularly there's an area that we wanted to talk about today, and that's why I'm thrilled that Elaine's able to be with us to share her insights, the experiences she's got, and also, importantly, some practical tips. So don't forget, you can tweet us at hashtag IBM CMO Study if you've got questions that you want us to follow up later. So Elaine, we've got a number of slides that I know you're going to talk us through, but also some very practical advice you're going to give us on the journey through this conversation. So over to you.
Thanks very much, Krishna, and hello to everybody. And thank you for the great summary of my career. All I can say is I've been working in this space for a long time, and I've learned a lot of lessons, so I'm happy to share those with you folks. So what is a customer-centric vision? Well, one of the things that astounded me in terms of the results of the CMO study, out of 1,700 CMOs across the world in different sectors, large companies, small companies, B2B, B2C, everything really, I was astounded to find that there was a lot of alignment in what people were saying to me. Everybody was finding the same thing, that they wanted to adopt a customer-centric vision. So one of the things that I would say is, what do people mean by a customer-centric vision? lots of people and lots of consultancies have lots of sort of fancy words around this, but what I really, really love is the quote up there on this slide from one of our consumer products clients out in Singapore. The perfect solution is to serve each customer individually. The problem, well, there's 7 billion of them, so where do you start? and that is the essence of the customer-centric vision. So for me, if I think about where we were a few years ago, and in some organizations this is still the case now, that if I hold my two hands up, on the left hand, I have a whole stack of products and services that my organization would offer into the market, each of them headed up as a sort of usually a P&L line of business by an executive who sits on the board. And then on the other hand, I will have a whole bunch of channels which are the main routes to market, and each of those will be represented on my board by an executive. And then also on the board, I have the Chief Marketing Officer. That guy or lady is kind of straddled between the two worlds of the pillars of the product P&Ls, the people who bring in the bread and butter into my organization, and then the channels, the guys who have the routes for those products into the market. And the CMO largely is kind of sitting in the middle saying it's wrong that we drive our strategy from the products and from the channels. What we need to do is switch to a vision where we actually drive our strategy from the customer by a deep understanding of what the customer needs. What is the best thing that we can do for this specific customer today? Is it giving them some information to help them to get better value out of the products and services that they've already trusted with us as their business relationship with us? Is it telling them that we can make a special offer to them about a particular new thing that they haven't done with us before? There's a whole million and one things that we could say to this person today. What is the best thing that we can do to give that customer the best value from us and the best view of our brand? So that in essence is the dilemma. So sit in my chair for a minute, because I interviewed a lot of these CMOs and I was listening to them saying this. So I was saying, well, if you get this vision and you know exactly what it is you want to do, why haven't you done it? Why are you where you are now? And to a man, they all said pretty much the same thing. Well, we know we want to do this vision. The problem is, how do we build a business case to align the different guys on the board behind it? So we have the guys who own the products, we have the guys who own the channel to market, and they're not aligned behind this customer centricity vision. All they can see is the old world. So that is the takeaway that IBM took from the CMO study, is we need to find a way to help these guys to turn the insight into action, basically.
Yeah, perhaps we can actually go a little into some of that research then, because I think there's some interesting information here. And I know I was struck by it in terms of why people perhaps are feeling a little bit challenged. Particularly, it's great that you actually were able to look specifically at Europe. There was a lot of people who actually responded from Europe, and we often see people looking for data, particularly, let's say, UK and Ireland. I'm in Ireland, you're in the UK. Maybe you can take us through that top level around what you're finding.
Okay, so on this slide, what you can see are the results of people talking to us about how underprepared they feel to cope with particularly the data explosion. Now, it's interesting because the top 4 issues there, data explosion, social media, growth of channels and device choices, and the shifting customer demographics. The fourth one there, the 69%, which is obviously, slightly smaller than the others. For me, if I look at those 4 things together, it's cause and effect. So the cause there is the change in consumer demographics that is really driving the other 3, which are all effects of that change. So what we're seeing really is the rise of the young, and the young being much more capable and able to use a whole plethora of devices and channels together. So whereas, in the past people have tended to always go to the call center or always go into a branch, creatures of habit, what we find is the younger people will use 5 or 6 different channels in a given day, so including social media. So what that's causing is an explosion of data, and that's different data than the organizations have had to cope with before. So everybody is in a position, or most people are in a position now, where they can cope with handling transactional data because it comes along in nice structured formats out of the back of different IT systems, which is very different from the kind of data that we see coming out of social media. So that's much, much higher in volume, and it's largely unstructured. So we have a much bigger job of work to do to actually take that data, mine it to extract the nuggets of truth truth out of it, to understand the sentiment of, what does Elaine Fletcher feel about my brand? What am I saying about a particular experience that I had? So you have to understand the nuances of irony, humour, sarcasm, etc., which you haven't ever had to cope with on a straight transactional basis before.
So in terms of sources of insight, we might want to turn to that in terms of, the things that people will find and actually were impacting on their strategy.
Well, the interesting thing on this slide, and I guess it's a bit of a side comment really, in that everyone's talking about customer centricity and wanting to understand individuals to shape the strategy. But when you look at the hard results of what are people using today to influence their strategic decisions, it isn't basically the individual insights from people. By and large, it's still as it was a few years ago. It's third-party reviews, rankings, it's retail shopper analysts, etc., online comms, market research, corporate strategy, benchmarking, those kinds of things. So what we're seeing is what they want to do in the future is quite different to what they want to do today, or what they're able to do today, which is based on individuals. So you'll see there the red is basically the traditional group insights that come in, as opposed to the yellow on the graph, which is key sources of insight from tracking individuals. So what we're seeing there is there's a big desire to do things differently in the future, but from where we are today in the red, we're largely basing a lot of our insights on what we would have been basing them on 5 years ago.
And any thoughts in terms of, again, Europe, UK, Ireland, within that, versus other parts of the world? Because some people are clearly marketing across many different regions as well.
Well, sadly, the fact seems to be consistent across all of the different regions, and we're seeing this on a lot of the foils where we're looking at sort of, global comparisons, etc. There isn't a lot of change here. We're still seeing overall rankings being fairly much consistent across different parts of the world.
Now, you touched before in terms of some of the things that are happening around technology. Perhaps we can explore that a little further, because I know it's an area that is almost the sense of, can this support us? Can this help us? Actually, or, where do we even get started? So what were some of the ideas that you're identifying through the work around how people are exploring the use of technology?
Well, it was interesting actually, because that point kind of links together to a couple of the insights that we saw on the earlier slides. So what we're seeing is people's desire to be customer centric. People want to be led by what the customer wants and what the customer is telling them through their behaviour. So they vote with the feet, as opposed to just what they're saying about you. What behaviours, what are their actions. So that's what people want to be driven by. But as we saw in the previous slide, that isn't what they're being driven by today. And the reason is they're not able. They want to do it, but they're not able to do it at the moment. So what they're doing is by and large, they're looking to increase their use of technology so that they can be much more customer driven in the future. So they're looking to do some deep dive automated analytics behind social media. They're looking to do detailed customer analytics, and by that we mean one-to-one analytics every night of what behaviour did Elaine Fletcher have today. So what did we do proactively when we contacted Elaine Fletcher, or maybe we didn't contact Elaine Fletcher? What happened when she contacted us? And that's a consistent view across all touch points. And what we're seeing particularly on the first two bars there is that the technology has changed a lot in the last 18 months in terms of what we're capable and able to do now, as opposed to what we were able to do 18 months ago. CRM, as you see, CRM isn't new. It's been around for some years now, but what we're seeing now in CRM is very different, because it's not just an analytical CRM, it's very much an automated actioning of the insights in terms of a whole closed loop marketing. So what we're doing there is we're having deep dive models running every day to surface the insights and the trends, and to tell us, well, what is the best thing that we can do for this customer today, and then we're actioning that automatically across all channels, basically inbound and outbound, and really orchestrating across all of those channels so that it doesn't matter whether, for example, we scored Elaine Fletcher as the best thing that we have to talk to her today is X, and the best way to talk to her today, because it's midweek, so she's busy, she's at work, she doesn't want to have, say, a phone call with us, so we'll send her an email because that's what she responds to best midweek. So that was the action that we decided. However, today, Elaine Fletcher happened to be walking past one of our branches and popped in. Therefore, the orchestration tools would automatically say, okay, this is Elaine Fletcher, it doesn't matter, we're going to get that same message across to her because it's still pertinent to her, only we'll do it via the face-to-face dialogue. So that's a very different sort of view. Also, in terms of here, we can see the rise really of mobile applications and proper content management, and that is all included in the multi-channel orchestration, so that whatever we see in terms of next best activity and dialogue management, that will encompass the mobile applications and the content management as well. So it's really about orchestrating one aligned conversation between your organization and each individual customer. And it doesn't matter what channel, because you can't control which channel. You can decide which channel you think is the optimum one, and you can make use of that where you're initiating the dialogue. But at any point in time, the customer may decide to initiate a dialogue on a completely different channel at any point.
I want to just pick up a couple of things of threads of conversation you said there. One was you were actually looking at global information just a moment ago versus, let's say UK and Ireland data. What about in terms of business to business and business to consumer? When you look at this around social media, customer analytics, CRM, I can imagine people who are working with consumers saying, oh, yeah, absolutely, that's where we need to be, looking to invest. What about the business to business? And I know there's an argument around, actually, it doesn't matter if it's business to business or business to consumer, we're actually talking to people. But very often people will say it's not relevant for us in business to business. What's your feedback around that?
Well, it's interesting, actually, because one of the things that I was asked quite early on after the CMO study was published was a couple of my larger B2B customers came to me and said, well, that's all very good for B2Cs, but what did you find in terms of B2Bs? Is there a segmentation that you can do a special cut to show me what the findings were for B2B? So I reached back to the US, where we hold all the data for the CMO study, and did some work there to do a special cut. And you know what? Very, very little difference. And that surprised me. And actually, I was talking about this to one of the B2Bs that we're doing this customer centricity program with at the moment. So the marketing director there, he was pulling my leg, to be honest. He said, well, Elaine, he said, it doesn't matter whether we're B2B or B2C. In essence, we're all B2P. And I said, well, that's a new one on me. What on earth's B2P? And I know the guy quite well. I thought this could be funny or dubious. And he said, no, it's business to person. He said, it's people that we're selling to in the end. He said, it's just that I've got a bigger challenge, because between myself and the person who's buying my end product, I've got another company. So I've got a bit of a brick wall between me and them. But he said, I still need to understand their needs if I'm going to succeed and drive my uplift stronger than my competitor. And he's dead right. So what we're saying here is we still need the same level of insight. It's just that we have to find a way to partner better with the organizations who are sitting between the B2B and their target person. So it's a bit more of a challenge, but the B2Bs that we've worked with in doing customer centricity programs are getting stunning uplift. So he's dead right. It's the same game.
Well, in fact, if you can think about many, fast-moving consumer goods, you often don't go straight to the consumer. You might be marketing to that consumer, but in fact, you're actually going through a distribution channel. So in some ways, it's no different for them too.
Exactly. So you've got to set the market. You've got to grow the need with the end consumer, but you've still got to convince the middleman, basically, that it's worth holding your products. And when you want to run special offers and campaigns and etc., you've got to get their buy-in and their support to do that with you. So you've got a double job. You've got to sell twice. You've got to create the need in the market, and then you've got to sell that need and service that need through your third party.
Now, I work with some very large organizations, and I can hear them talking about all these things. But actually, the third point you've got there is about customer relationship management platforms and tools. And I know IBM have a fantastic suite of services to support that. But let's have a look at some of the barriers. Actually, let me start with that one. Very often, I find that actually CRM platforms are not as extensively deployed as you might think. As I say, it's not new. Perhaps there's some new platforms, there's some additional functionality. We're starting to see social customer relationship management being integrated into platforms. Why do you think that is? Let's stay firstly with CRM, because in my experience, there are still organizations, middle-sized and large organizations, who are really not implementing them as well as they could do to get the data out that they're looking to explore from what you've said previously.
Yeah, it is an interesting fact now, and I can see that very much myself with the customers that I work with as well. So I think there's three broad classes, really. There's the ones who've been using CRM for some years and have moved to the sort of capability maturity model where they're really getting good value out of those CRM systems. There's others who have good CRM systems, and sometimes they're populated fairly well with single view of customer, but they've stopped there. It's been a sort of an IT-led initiative. So they've ticked the box, we've delivered the thing, it's in there, it's populated with customer data, and that's it, job done. And what they're not doing is then properly leveraging that. So they're not running analytical models, for example, that would yield actionable insights. They're not saying, for Elaine Fletcher, this is the segment she's in. She's got these holdings with her. She's got a high propensity to do X and Y, but only at this value. And if you offer it in this way. So unless they're doing that kind of modeling, they're not really able to get any actionable insight. They're just getting interesting information. And for me, I would say, well, don't bother, because unless an insight is going to be actionable for you, there's no point in having it. And then, of course, there's a third group of organizations who don't have it. And often that isn't because they don't want it. It's just because the cost has been prohibitive. They haven't been able to structure a business case that flies, basically, to allow them to make use of it. So there's two things that I would say to that kind of organization. So one is you need to look across the customer base that you've got and do some proper segmentation, either on your own or get somebody like IBM to come in and help you as a very short, sharp, high-level exercise to do that segmentation so that you can say, well, what would the uplift be if we were to do X, Y, and Z? And then we can look at what would the cost be, and is the business case there? Is the whole initiative worth a candle or not? The other thing I would say is that nowadays we don't necessarily have to buy the whole thing. That there's a lot of ways to take on board CRM solutions as technologies, so pay-as-you-go type technologies, but also you can say, if you haven't got the people on board to operate it, you can buy the whole thing as a service nowadays. Now, that wasn't necessarily available a few years ago, but it's worth looking at again now because the market has changed. So yes, IBM offer things as a service, but also other organizations do as well. So it's worth looking in that market. So don't just think CRM is for the big boys. It really isn't.
So, in fact, that bears out what you're talking about here in terms of what people were saying around some of the barriers around using technology, in terms of the barriers for change around moving to this customer-centric model. Cost might have been one, but you're saying there's some other alternatives there. What about some other things that you identified in the research?
So the lack of skills of potential users is quite a big one as well. So this is about not so much the IT department. It's much more about the marketeers and their ability to really set up a suite of business rules that would say, based on these insights, based on what the insights models are telling us about the potential for churn, the potential for cross-sell, upsell, etc., how we would bundle potentially a group of products and services in to make one offer to a customer that will extend life cycle and extend share of wallet, etc. How capable are the guys in the marketing department to actually set up and administer and manage that kind of sophisticated business ruling? What kind of experience have they got, and what level of agility? Because this isn't the kind of traditional sort of CRM system where you would configure it up and it would run for years. What we're talking about here is a very agile organization where they're very much driven by a suite of business rules that will change more or less day by day to keep in step with the changing market and the changing needs of consumers.
So let's look at digital. I know that's an area that you explored, particularly in terms of the managing of the shift towards digital technologies. Perhaps you can take us through that piece.
Yeah, so this is quite an interesting one, actually, because as I mentioned before, although a lot of people look at sort of digital technologies as being one subject in its own right, to me it isn't. It's the big change that's driving 9/10 of what we're seeing in terms of the change in the shape of marketing. So what we're seeing now, when it is not just what people have always thought of as traditionally, it's the rise of the young. Yes, it is the rise of the young, but also what we're seeing is right across the customer base, there's an appetite to shift towards digital technologies, because what people are finding is it's more convenient for them, but also they can get a much richer access to different offers. So a lot of people now will do things online simply because they think, yes, it's more convenient. Yes, it is. But also I can get things cheaper online. I know that it's, there's discounts from shopping online as opposed to walking into a store. But also, if I was, for example, to go in for an insurance product or service, if I go to one of the aggregator sites, I'm going to be able to compare things in a much better way than I could by, spending a tedious Saturday trogging around a whole load of different branches of banks, etc. So I think, there's a lot of different reasons of convenience and pricing that are driving people much more towards the digital technologies. But the other thing that people are finding as well is that they're getting much richer access to information to help them to make purchasing decisions. So a lot of people now completely distrust anything that the brand will say to them about a given product or service, and they will totally trust what people in social media will tell them about that product or service. And we're seeing that across lots and lots of different industries today.
Very often I come across people who have make a decision about what they're going to purchase through asking people in real life, their colleagues, their friends, and also they might look at advertising, they might look at magazines or publications, and then they go online. One of the things that really kind of caught me out this last week, I often ask questions when I'm running workshops around, take me through a decision around a purchase that you've just made. Let's say it's a camera or something. And in both of the last couple of programs I've done, I actually found two people, for the first time ever, there was no interaction offline. They didn't even ask a friend. So in both of those situations, people made a decision about making a purchase, and they didn't once ask a friend in real life or a family member or go to a store. Everything they made around that, it wasn't an insignificant purchase because it was around a camera or a video camera. Everything was done online, and they definitely didn't go to the manufacturer sites. They looked at independent sites or review sites or platforms such as YouTube to make a decision. And actually, in both cases, they made the purchase online. Now, again, you can do the research and you may still go and make a purchase locally. But I thought it was interesting that they didn't even ask a friend, a neighbor, a colleague. And in fact, somebody else in the group said, actually, yeah, even if I was going to ask a family member, I'd probably do it by email or send them a text.
Yes, yeah. I have to say, Krishna, I'm guilty of that myself, because 4 months ago now I changed my car, bought a new car, and I'd kind of shortlisted the 4 cars I was interested in, and I talked to a few people, but none of my family or friends actually had any of the 4 cars. So I just basically I'd looked online and looked at the reviews, etc., and that's where I'd come to the grouping of the 4 cars. But in the end, I just basically went out there online and found out, just had conversations with people who own the cars, and I very quickly arrived at the choice of the car I was going to make. So yes, I didn't buy it online. I went into the car showroom and bought the car, but I didn't even bother test driving the other 3 because I'd heard so much negativity from people who owned them and so much positivity from the people who owned this particular model that I then bought. And I have to say I love it, so I would be very positive about it as well. So.
Yeah, I hope you're giving a positive review online about it to help other people.
I certainly have, yeah, and I answer people's questions on it as well, yeah, particularly people who can't get the cruise control working, because I struggle with that too. Finally figured it out. That was the only downside, but there you go.
I was really pleased in this part of the research to see the development of social interaction and governance and policies being one of the more significant priorities, because there's a lot of work to be done, I think, in that area. There's not necessarily been integration. But I was also interested to see that it wasn't as big a priority around the monetization of social media.
Indeed, yes. And I think the issue is, people need the monetization to drive the business case of getting deeper into social media. So they're getting into social media, and then very quickly, hot on the heels of that, they're realizing that the governance and policies that they have in place just aren't up to it. So what we're seeing is a little bit of a lead and lag there. In the lead is the commercial benefit of monetizing social media, but very, very quickly on the heels of that lag is then the beefing up the governance policies in there.
So let's look at the CMO Business Value Accelerator program and model that you have here from IBM.
Okay, so what I can share with you here is most of the people that I spoke with during the CMO study were absolutely certain the customer-centric vision is right for them. But what I was doing is sort of coming back to them and saying, well, is it a panacea or is it a pipe dream? And how do we decide? What will it actually deliver for you in real, hard-nosed ROI? And how do you go about calculating that? So the first part of this slide basically shows you some of the stunning uplifts that have been achieved by, organizations that we've worked with so far in different sectors. So I've deliberately picked out, different organizations from different sectors here, and they're actually in different parts of the world as well. But you can see, these are typical of the type of improvements that we're seeing. They're not gradual, they're not slight, they're an absolute step change in performance, and each one of these has been driven by in-year ROI. So all of these are the first year. So you can see that, for them, it's absolutely been the panacea. But for each one of those, people say, well, for every one of those on there, are there like 10 or 20 that were mediocre or negative? And so far, I have to say, hand on heart, no, there haven't been. But the reason for that is we're very careful and cautious in terms of how we model the business case for each organization before we go into a customer-centric program.
So in terms of the outcomes of the research, has that actually influenced the model that you're working with? Did you find that to be the case?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And in fact, if I'm honest about it, Krishna, I only built the model in response to what people were saying to me during the CMO study. So the model came into being halfway through 2011, because I did the first round of interviews in sort of May time, and then we did all the feedbacks in when was it? July, August time. So between the first tranche and the second tranche, I built the model, and I had a sort of short list of 8 clients that I wanted to bounce it off to get feedback, and I got around to bouncing it off the first 2, and straight away they loved it, and they said, right, having done this, we're now going to go full blast into a program to do this. We've been wanting to do it for years. We've never had the business case ammunition before to get the consensus on the board to act, and so they went straight forward into the act stage, and I got sort of tied up in that, so I never actually got to bounce it off the other 6. I have now, but at the time I hadn't. So we've sort of gone forward with a lot of organizations now in different sectors to do this, and we found that the business model really, really helps us, because as I mentioned before, there's 1,000,001 different things that you could do for the customer, and what we need to do is build a proper ROI model that will lead us to a sort of a heat map of where is the best ROI. And do you know what? For me, the ROI isn't all about cross-sell, upsell. What we say to customers is we need to get each of their customers into a stage where their advocacy of you and your brand is at a certain level before we can start to hit them with any cross-sell, upsell message. Now, I know that sounds like common sense, but when you look back at some of the earlier slides we were looking at, where people are really looking at monetization above anything else, and what I have to say when we're doing the ROI models is you can't do it that way. You've got to, first of all, invest the time and energy in absolutely generating an excellence of customer experience on the lines of business that the customer's already doing with you. And that will drive the customer advocacy level up to a certain point where you can then start to suggest the odd thing in between, still more customer service, and useful, helpful messages that aren't selling anything. You can start to then interlace the odd sales message in there. But it has to be done with that level of focus.
Yeah, and there are some organizations who still need to get back to kind of fundamentals of customer support. And you see that all the time, don't you, in terms of perhaps people writing comments. They may be writing comments in social media platforms as well, where you can see there's clearly something that's happened. And that might be because perhaps they've got some change of services, they've got a change of people. In fact, in some cases, they've actually perhaps moving to a third-party provider and they've got some hiccups in that process. So you've still got to get that in place.
That's right, absolutely. And one of the sad facts of life is how few companies are actually listening to what's going out there in social media land. They could learn so much so easily by listening in on some of that. They don't need to even reply to it. They just need to listen and take note. And the reply isn't always a direct reply to the person. The reply is basically, acting and fixing the things that are causing the issues. And it's a very sad fact of life that so few companies are doing that at the moment. The few that we are working with that are doing that are getting very, very positive results from it. But it's still a sort of an embryonic skill at the moment.
Perhaps we can look a little deeper into the model and the journey that you actually take people through in terms of the model.
Yeah, the sole objective really of the model is to build a business case that is strong enough to win cross-business support. So it's, as I mentioned before, the guys with the powerful voices on the board tend to be the people that run the product, profit and loss accounts. So at any given point, you'll see for each product, there'll be what you would call a sort of a bell curve. I'm sure we've all seen these in the past where, at one point in time, there's a new product launch. So it's on the steep up side of the bell, and then it moves across into a sort of steady state, fairly flat shape of curve. And then the product gets a bit long in the tooth, or the competitors come a bit fresher into the market, and then the market share tends to decline. So that's what we always traditionally called the bell curve. And what most organizations do is they map each product into that bell curve, and they'll say, oh, this product is at this point and that product's at that point. And what I say is that isn't the case. For every segment of customer, there is a point in the bell curve where that product is today, and you can move that product into a different point in that bell curve for that segment by some careful positioning and marketing and some careful structuring of offers. And very often that isn't just making an offer in terms of, Elaine Fletcher gets an offer on this particular insurance policy on its own, for example. More often than not, what it is, it's saying, well, Elaine Fletcher, we understand you. You have a high propensity to want these 16 insurance policies for yourself and your family. Up till now, you've always bought each one by one from different organizations. And what we can do, because of your loyalty on this particular product that you've held with us for, let's say, 2-3 years, we can offer you a special deal over a 12-month period that if you move these other 8 policies as they mature, move over to us for these 8 insurances, for example, then you'll get a hefty discount. And particularly in an insurance market, this is great because at the moment the insurance aggregators are sort of done very well in getting people like me to cherry pick. So I'll get my car insurance from one place, my house insurance, etc., my life insurance, all from different places, because I will largely do that through aggregators. So what the insurance companies are doing now is saying, well, we can beat them at their own game by aggregating all of our products and services that we could offer to Elaine Fletcher and giving her a decent discount so that she feels a level of loyalty to us, which will be very appealing to me if, and only if, I have a degree of trust in that brand, which is coming back to what I was saying earlier about, we need to focus our efforts on making sure that I have really, really good feelings and really good quality of service from this organization before they try to sell me anything new. Common sense, I know, but it's wasted on some organizations. So the model that you can see on this slide, you'll see how differences in customer behavior are being triggered by the actions of a customer centricity program as we go through the different quarters in there. And you can see how revenue will change as we're going through and doing different campaigns and different initiatives through those quarters. So those are the 2 boxes that you'll see on the bottom. The weird slider bars that you'll see on the top section there, those are all areas that allow us to do lots of what-if scenarios. So what you're seeing on the bottom there are the natural results of the program. So this is basically our ROI driven program where every 3 to 4 months we will deliver something, and that something will generate very strong ROI, and those are the lines that you can see on the bottom right-hand box there, the revenue lines. What we also allow you to do with the what-if slider bars and those little 3 graphs that you'll see in the middle of that screen, we allow you to redraw those graphs and just pull the different slider bars into different positions and at different points and then collide them. And what that's saying is basically it allows you to configure in a challenge. So you look at the curves on the graphs on the bottom left and particularly on the bottom right, and you'll say, yeah, that looks great, we would go with that, but what if the regulator does this? What if my competitor does that? What if these 3 key customer segments suddenly do this? Oh, and my God, what happens if all of that lot collides at the same time? How healthy does this program look then? So what we're helping people to do is just establish exactly at what point this program is extremely tenable, marginally tenable, or absolutely not tenable. Yeah. So the way I look at this, Krishna, is without this kind of model, you're asking them to move into a customer-centric journey, which is a really, really big change for them. It's kind of like jumping out of a plane without a parachute on. So this business model allows them to have a parachute on, so they can model the most likely outcomes of given changes under different circumstances. And this is the kind of the model that's allowed people to act and to get on with doing these customer centricity programs where they haven't been able to before.
And I know that you actually look at it against a number of different factors, so perhaps you can talk about that from customer experience through to technology, through to a strategy and so on.
Yeah, so people often look at the business model on the previous slide and say, well, that looks great, but how on earth do you how do you set it up? How do you get to the figures that you put in that? How do I know it's real? So this slide basically explains how we deliver what we call a business value accelerator, which tends to be just a very high level sort of 2 to 3 week exercise where we'll have the business model in the middle there. But what we do is we ask lots of questions and we get lots of information back. It's not decimal place accuracy information, so we wouldn't be asking you to do any really deep dive mining or anything sophisticated. We're just working with whatever data you've got available in your hand on the day. So we make best use of what you can give us. So we're looking along the dimensions of sort of the customer experience across all the different channels. We're understanding your strategy, where you are now, where you want to be. We're understanding your operating model. How do you currently operate? What is the structure of your business? How do you reward people? How do you measure people? How much of that is going to have to change in a customer-centric world? We're looking at the efficiency and effectiveness of your use of resources at the moment, be it technology, people, third-party relationships, etc. We're looking a lot at the technology and the data that you have to say, well, what can be reused from the old world into a customer-centric world? How much data do you have that will allow us to do the data mining and the data modeling to say, so that we can predict accurately what is the next best thing we can do for each customer. So during the 3 weeks, we have 2 or 3 people working with you, asking lots of questions, looking at lots of things around the organisation so that they can build up a good picture of you as you are today along all of these 4 sections, and also build a picture of where you want to go and look at the feasibility of that journey and look at the gaps within that journey. And that's basically what we give as outputs. It's the recommendations, the gap and options review, the business model, as we saw on the previous slide, populated with your own figures, and a roadmap for change. So that roadmap is based really on the ROI heat map that we have. So in truth, you'll be delivered 2 roadmaps. So one is the optimized roadmap that basically says, here is the ROI. So if we could wave a magic wand and do anything we want to, then this would be how we would do the program. So that is the first roadmap. And then the second roadmap is what we would call the feasible roadmap. So that is based on all the constraints that we've found along the way, which might say, well, with the best will in the world, we would want to do this step right up front because it yields stunning ROI. However, to be able to do that step, we need to access this particular system or the data out of this system, and there's another program already in place that involves that particular system. That means we're not allowed to access it for another 9 months. So that now has to go into drop 4 instead of drop 1. So the reason we deliver both of those roadmaps is sometimes organisations will say, well, okay, yeah, we'll have to live with that. Other times they'll look at the 2 roadmaps and say, I can see what we're losing here. No, we're just going to restructure the other programme and put this one as a priority. But it basically gives you the choice then. You can decide what you want to do.
So I know that you actually also explore the whole area of benefits, and you've given us an example here of a European bank where you might look at that. And so you actually can look at that from revenue growth to customer retention, risk management, technology costs being optimized, all very, very important areas. Let me just ask, though, do you find that some organizations are a little nervous about moving to this approach? Because when you get to really customize, highly customized programs for an individual, and you gave yourself as an example on the way through here, and we could therefore come together and put together a package that may meet all of your needs. Let's say it might be about banking, or as you were talking about in terms of how you experience insurance. Is there any ever a degree of nervousness about, but if I do that for them, actually, we're going to move to a very personalized, customized model. However, what happens if somebody comes back and said, yeah, but I want the same, but their circumstances are different? How do you manage that?
Yeah, so what we're doing is we're making sure that every individual customer will always get the best offer for them, obviously within the constraints of what the organisation can sensibly do as well. So we will cannibalise margin to give the best offer to customer A, whereas we might not cannibalise margin to the same extent for customer B, because we can see that customer B's behaviour is different. So maybe the decision's been based on the customer lifetime value, that we think customer A is going to be worth more than customer B, so we really, really want to keep them and grow them. Maybe it's been based on the risk or the claims history or something like that, I'm going back to insurance again. So there will always be different offers for different people. A lot of the nervousness within organizations is because if we're honest about it, the customer centricity model means that they perceive that they have a lot less control of their destiny than they have in the old world. So in the old world, they're very much controlling how each product is taken to market. One size fits all. You have one price for all. This is the price for this particular product. And it's very easy to forecast then, how much revenue are we going to get in? How much margin are we going to get in per 1,000 customers? That's very different when you let go the reins and you actually allow business rules to create the pricing for you on an individual customer basis. And so that's really where the nervousness comes in, and that's why we have the business models there ahead of time to help people to forecast exactly what they're going to get when, from which kind of customers and which kind of customer behaviour changes they want to stimulate in the market. And it's interesting because once we put these solutions in, every day each customer is scored, and every day they're rescored based on the behaviours and the dialogues of that previous day. So in the reality, the organisation has far, far deeper control over how their products and services are taken to market and priced, because they're getting day-to-day feedback based on those dialogues and based on the actuals of the day, and they can change, fine-tune, tweak the business rules as much as they want to on any given day to change the outcomes for the next day. So they have a lot more control, and this is something that each client has said to me, once they've got into the driving seat with those, they've said, well, we believe the model, and we talked to loads of other customers who've already done this, so that's why we believe the model, and we had to have a lot of trust. And to be honest, it was a leap of faith, because we felt that we were, giving over the reins of control to a machine. But now that we're in flow of it, we actually realise that we've got, far, far greater fine-grained control than we would ever have dreamed of having in the past.
I really like this final slide that we have here, which is around questions that we actually can even ask ourselves today in terms of how well do we do? Because very often, a lot of organizations have been going through immense amount of change. Sometimes we've been finding it hard enough to be able to just manage the change within an organization, let alone look out and look to what else is happening. And therefore, all of a sudden, people are saying things have shifted, where our customers, consumers, however you describe who you're marketing to, have shifted. Their buying patterns have changed. There's a new competitor, or in fact, in some sectors, there could be 3 or 4 or 5 new ones all of a sudden. And also that those competitors don't have to be just down the road. They can be anywhere in the globe these days as well. Perhaps just as we wrap up, take us through some thoughts on this. Perhaps you can also share with us, if people want to take this a step further and particularly want to explore how you and your colleagues could help them, that would be great.
Okay, yeah. On this final foil, you will understand this for your own organisation. So just ask those questions of yourself first, and then of some of your peers. This is really how you can gauge at what level in the sort of maturity curve your organisation is at being able to do some of these things. So ask them and answer them honestly. So one of the things that I find most organisations really can't do is question 3. So question 1, some organisations say, well, it's quite patchy. Some of our product silos are frankly inaccessible, so it's very hard to find out what customer needs are for those particular products. Other product silos, yes, we can access, and occasionally you'll meet a customer who will say, well, we haven't got a complete single view of customer, but we've probably got about 70-80% coverage, and then you can quite easily help them to go the extra mile to get the 100% coverage. But whereas this question 1 used to be the biggest blocker for everybody, because everybody had this vision of bringing together a single view of customer, and lots have tried and sort of crashed and burned, because to be honest, up till about 18 months ago, it was very, very difficult to do this, and the technologies were quite sort of patchy and didn't really help that much. They'd help to a certain extent, but there were still big custom programs that would run for years on end to try and do this. That isn't the case now. The tools are available, and I would say that because I work for IBM, which I know I shouldn't say is a really good plumbing company. That's kind of how it feels sometimes. We're very good at getting data out of source systems and massaging it to blend it. So even things that I always used to think were very, very difficult to do. So for example, in single view of customer, you'll get the easy things, So for example, Elaine Fletcher, in this particular household, are there actually 2 Elaine Fletchers? Is it mother and daughter? Are there 2 physical people there, both called Elaine Fletcher, which often happens, or is it simply that somebody in a back office system a few years ago mistyped my birthday? So it's actually 1 person. So what we do nowadays is we'll look at the behavioural attributes of the 2 supposed Elaine Fletchers and say, well, are these 2 behavioural attributes very, very close? In which case the chances are it's actually 1 person with the birthday mistyped in 2 places, or are the behavioural attributes very, very different, in which case the chances are it is a mother and daughter. So things like that are actually easy to do now because the technology does it for you, whereas it wasn't like that a couple of years ago. But as I say, questions 1 and 2 we can do quite easily now with technology help. Questions 3 with the technology we can do quite easily now, but very few organisations are actually on the ground able to do this because they don't make use of that kind of technology that would talk as an orchestrated dialogue across all inbound and outbound channels, record in a structured way the outcomes of each conversation and feed that back in so that the scoring engines at the end of each day can churn away and give the marketing departments an accurate view of how well are we doing with each of these marketing initiatives and where do we want to fine-tune and tweak different things. So I think you'll get the drift by now without me tediously walking through every single question on this foil. But basically the questions are the big questions that we've found coming back from all of the CMOs that we work with. And we've structured our Business Value Accelerator to help the CMOs address each of these questions. And the ones that we've worked with so far, we learn a lot as we're going through. So we've actually got it to a stage now where it seems to be hitting the spot for everyone and being very successful each time we do it. So we'd love to either do it for you, which obviously we would love to, or just really to bounce some ideas around and talk to you about it, because every discussion that we have we learn from, and hopefully you do too, get some value from us as well. So I'd be very happy to meet with you and have a brainstorm basically just about where you are, what you're trying to do, what your issues are, and whether or not we can help. So do reach out and contact me. You'll see my name on Twitter at the beginning of these slides, or you can just email me. I'm elaine.fletcher@uk.ibm.com.
Thanks so much, Elaine. I actually will make sure that people have all of those details also in the end notes, and also you're on LinkedIn, so people can reach out to you there. As we wrap up today, I hope you have enjoyed being with us, and I know that Elaine would really welcome your feedback, either getting contacted by email or by LinkedIn. She's very generously given us her time today, and even in terms of feedback around what you found helpful, in fact, even what you'd like to know more about, because I think that would help inform Elaine in terms of other events that she does, because I know that IBM do a lot of live events as well across the world. And in fact, I was just looking at something that's happening very soon here in Ireland, which I was delighted to see that you were doing as well. So there's opportunities to connect with people. But as I said, get back to Elaine, give us some feedback about the program, give us some feedback about what you'd like to do. And it sounds as though, Elaine, you're up for cups of coffee and conversations, even if they can't meet you face to face, a Skype chat.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, coffee's nicer, but if you can't pour me a cup of coffee down the Skype link, then a voice is good enough.
Thank you again for being with us, Elaine. And remember, we'll be posting the details of how you can get this replay, and we'll have that over on Facebook. But if you also want to know about our future events, we love to bring you the voices of authorities and marketing and digital marketing and social media from across the globe. And also we provide free events in terms of giving you education about how to use different platforms in your organization. Thanks again for being with us here today, Elaine. You've been listening today to Elaine Fletcher of IBM Global Business Services, and it's been my privilege to be here as the facilitator for today. My name is Krishna, and I look forward to meeting you again at a future Biz Growth webinar. Thanks so much.